It's through understanding our history that we can wake our people up, particularly Black people, to say, listen, this is what is really going on. And until you understand that there are pathways that have been in place, there's an agenda that has been in place to see to it Black people are forever defeated and dominated. How then do you get out of it? You don't go to the doctor unless you know you're sick.
This is the journey to One Africa.
For that wonderful presentation, I truly want to take an opportunity to thank UCLA and the Director for African Studies for welcoming me to UCLA, not only today, but during my previous visit to Los Angeles. The Department of African Studies is something that I would hope is a department that every institution in this country has, and hopefully they will continue to focus on all the important issues that Africa is dealing with, but more importantly, let's teach the Americans our languages as well. Africa is an interesting, diverse continent that has so much yet to be learned by the world, and I think engaging the Americans in African languages is one perfect way of making sure that our engagement is indeed complete. We are here today to talk about the book that I wrote after leaving the office as the African Union Permanent Representative to the United States. My mandate was top two, to engage the US government as well as to mobilize the African diaspora to participate in the development of Africa. Most people are not aware that no amount of money can be put into Africa and bring the desired results. Why? Because the capacity that Africa needs, the expertise that Africa needs is in the diaspora due to the brain drain that has taken place over the past 400 years, starting with the slaves, followed by those who left in search of greener pastures. The overall result is such that the intellectual capacity that Africa needs is in the diaspora. Let me give you an example. Take Edge Healthcare. In Ghana, there are more Ghanaian doctors in New York City alone than in the entire country of Ghana. President Nana Addo, when he took office, he thought building more hospitals, renovating old ones, was the way to address healthcare issues. To his surprise, half of those wards are sitting empty. Why? Not because there are no patients, but because there are no doctors. Nigeria is no different. There are more Nigerian doctors in Los Angeles than in the entire country of Nigeria. The same is repeated in every African country, in every sector, engineering, education. All the expertise that's needed to build the Africa we want is in the diaspora. The question then becomes, we have had the colonizers in Africa for centuries. Why is it that we don't see the development that should have been built over the centuries by the colonizers while they were busy siphoning Africa's natural resources out of the continent? What you will find is that the railway lines that were built, the roads that were constructed, were going either from a forest to the nearest port to carry all the deforestation activities that we're taking on, or from the pit to the next port where they were extracting natural resources, minerals, to the nearest port. So the infrastructure they put in place was strategic, basically to serve their purposes, to continue to exploit Africa, to continue to extract out of Africa and take it to Europe to continue to build their own nations. They have never had an interest in building an Africa that works for the Africans. That's a fact. They're aware of it. And it's just that we Africans have not been standing up and pushing back and saying, that is wrong, you need to stop it. But a lot of it goes back to the history. How did the Europeans come into Africa? How long ago did they come into Africa? And what they have done to see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. So as I was going through my day-to-day work, trying to understand, trying to figure out exactly how am I going to deliver on my mandate, one thing became very obvious to me. It was the lack of understanding of what was really going on in Africa. Even some people in the US government, they had a limited understanding and appreciation of what was going on, let alone the diaspora, even the continental Africans, who you would have thought they would have some idea. But then you also realize, even to this day, African history, we're still using the colonial textbooks. The true African history is not being taught. It's very difficult to find books that tell the truth about what really happened in Africa. The colonizers, when it comes to the atrocities they committed, a lot of the data, the information was either burned. When it was too much, they would fly over the oceans and dump the documents in the deepest waters that they could find. The data was destroyed to make sure that they covered up all the atrocities they committed around the continent. Then you fast forward and say, in modern day, every time I would address the African diaspora, the first question invariably across the board, even when I addressed American businesses, but Ambassador, the African leaders are corrupt. And I would say, yes, but the watchdog, talk to me about other corruptors as well. The watchdogs of corruption are telling us that 50 billion gets out of Africa from corruption every year. I get that. We must stop it. We must go after those monies. Where is the outrage over France taking over $500 billion out of Africa every year? You got two thieves. One thief is holding a briefcase with 50 billion, and the other thief has a briefcase with 500 billion. You want me to spend all my energies over 50 billion and completely ignore $500 billion. To my surprise, almost 100% of the time, when I spoke about the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization, which is the pact that the African countries, former French colonies, were forced to sign by the French as the countries were quote unquote getting their independence, included demanding that these countries deposit their bank reserves, starting with 85%, with the Central Bank of France under the control of the French Minister of Finance. So I had my question to the diaspora and all the audiences after speaking to say, I understand the outrage over leadership issues in Africa. I understand the issue of corruption, but where is your outrage over little bitty France taking $500 billion out of our poor African countries year in and year out for 6 decades? And that's when I got the silence. And everybody was shocked. And I would pause and challenge everybody to Google the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. You see, it's one thing to say, here you are, we are giving you your independence. This happened between the late 50s and early 1960s. On one hand, we are giving you your independence. On the other hand, you must sign this document agreeing to continue to be colonized. Are you with me? I need you to sign this document. You're free, but really agree to continue to be colonized. So 2 countries said, absolutely not. We are not going to sign this deplorable document. That was Guinea and Mali. When the French stormed into those countries, that was back in 1957 for Guinea, and they took everything that they thought they had brought to those 2 economies. They took whatever they could take, they took. What they could not take, they destroyed. They poured concrete into sewage pipes. They caused total destruction. The president of Ghana, newly appointed Kwame Nkrumah, in his efforts to help those 2 economies, created the first ever non-union of any African states, Ghana, Guinea, and Mali. It was the beginning of what would have been a free Africa But what was done to Guinea and Mali was an example to other countries to say, if you do not sign the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization, this is the fate that awaited you. That was the beginning. Since then, we have had a total of 65 coups in Africa. 22 leaders were assassinated. Many others were imprisoned simply because, one, they either were not going along with the demands of the colonial master, or a natural resource had been discovered in that country, and some in the West wanted those natural resources. And then we also had mercenaries who were just going around starting coups for their own personal benefits. Of the 22 assassinated African leaders, 16 are from the former French countries, and the French legionnaires were involved. Well-documented facts. So for those who question to say, why isn't that the Africans and the African leaders in particular haven't done something about what is going on in Africa? The consequences are real. The leaders would be assassinated. The mere fact of talking about trying to stop sending your bank reserves to France would result in the swift action from the French. There would be a coup or some form of instability in your country, and the leader would be eliminated. So after a while, it was just a no-go area. Heads of states could not go there. They could not talk about it. And that was just France. France was the biggest West perpetrator when it came to how France continues to abuse and mistreat its colonies. Two other important aspects of the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. The pact also said, all your minerals discovered and yet to be discovered, French companies have the first right of refusal. All your contracts, public and private, French companies have the first right of refusal. Your military could only be trained by France. Your military equipment can only be purchased from France. France would have military presence in your country. You are not allowed to have military alliance with your neighbors, and that France could invade your nation without notice if France felt that their interests were being violated. Now, if you were to be a leader of one of those African nations, you have given up your financial resources, you have given up your military, you have given up your natural resources. What power do you have? And by the way, after they collected all the 85% of the bank reserves from the 14 African countries, France would deposit those reserves, invest them in their French stock market under the French name. The leaders may or may not know the returns. Should any of those countries need some of the funds they deposited with France, they would have to submit their annual returns, their annual reports to France. And if approved, they could only access 20% of their deposit of last year only. Any other deposit from the previous year, forget it, they're gone. There is no way, pathway to retrieve those funds. You could only access up to 20% of the previous year's return. And here is the kicker. If approved, you would get the funds as a loan at commercial interest rate. You go from dumping all your money with France. You should really have a huge credit. Not only do you not have any credit based on the funds you've been depositing, but should you need some of your own money, now you have a loan that you gotta pay back to France at commercial interest rates. That is our reality. That was 6 decades ago. Fast forward, it's only until a month ago, last month, in June, that the French Parliament finally signed and ratified a law which now stopped the African countries from depositing their funds with the French Central Bank. Just last month. Why did it take so long? Because the fear of the fear of France and what France could do to any nation that chooses to oppose France. Let's also look at other nations. The British, the Italians, the Germans, the Portuguese, the Belgians, as they were giving independence to their colonies in Africa, they all gave limited political independence. Economic liberation was completely held back from the Africans. To this day, the average African country, 75% of the employers, the multinationals, they are from the countries that colonized them previously. So if you were colonized by the British, the majority of the employers, the big companies in your country are British. If you were Portuguese, if you were Belgian and German, they control the bulk of the economy. Most recent example would be Glencore, a company called Glencore. It's a British company in Zambia, had not been paying taxes for decades. And the country has been working with them to say, you must pay taxes. This is not fair. If the average Zambian on the street is paying taxes, you gotta pay taxes too. When the government finally said, if you do not pay your taxes, we are going to revoke your license and you got 7 days to pay your taxes, Glencore responds by laying off 11,000 people. So when you lay off 11,000 employees, you're basically impacting the lives of, at a minimum, 55,000 people. And that's the reality for the average African president. If you push too hard, they have a way of getting to you. And those games are being played every day to this day. But the president of Zambia stood his ground and he put out a tender and he said, anybody that wants to come and get these 2 mines, you're welcome to. And of course, requests came flying in. So then Glencore, realizing that they're losing this game, they called back all the employees and they came back to the president with their tail between their legs and they started negotiating in a more meaningful way. This is going on all across the continent. The multinationals that are doing business in Africa are not paying taxes. They have safe havens that go back to colonization. Britain is well known for having the largest safe havens. They underreport what they are extracting out of the ground. They underreport how much they are selling, whatever it is that they report. The end game is billions, if not trillions, of money that should stay on the continent is going out through the safe havens that are being used by the multinationals. A lot of illegal farming, illegal mining, illegal logging, illegal fishing, illegal trade in exotic plants and animals. All that combined, you are talking trillions getting out of the continent. You look at what's going on in DRC today and Cameroon. They have satellites that are showing them nowadays exactly where the minerals are. The poor villagers don't realize they're sitting on a humongous gold mine, on a humongous coltan mine, on a humongous diamond mine. So what do those who want those diamonds, who want those natural resources do? They take a few soldiers, they take a few young people, they give them alcohol and arm them with M16s and AK-47s. They go kill off a few people and the villagers run away. They stay behind and continue their illegal mining. This is going on up to this day. I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg in order to get a feel for how Africa is under siege. And for those who question, why aren't things getting better? Resume change. Let's change leadership. Tell me one African country that has a change in leadership and things have changed. None. Why? It's because the fundamentals have not been addressed. You got to understand, Berlin Conference, they met from November of 1884, the colonizers, to February of 1885, precisely to organize themselves so they can see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. I repeat, they met, the colonizers, they met in Berlin at the invitation of the Chancellor of Germany and his sidekick, King Leopold, to precisely see to it that Africa and her children are forever defeated and dominated. That was 136 years ago. The little bitty countries that you find today, those are little bitty countries designed to fail, countries designed to never succeed. That should they try to succeed by any means necessary, like we always do as Black people, we are survivors. We are easy to destabilize. That strategy that was put in place during the Berlin Conference 136 years ago remains in place today. Some say, but how, Ambassador? Well, look at this world. If we were to assume this world is a boxing game, would you take a lightweight boxer and throw them in the ring with the heavyweight boxer? Would you take a wannabe boxer and throw them in the same boxing ring with the heavyweight boxer? You see, what they did during the Berlin Conference, they gave these countries sovereignty at independence. Prior to independence, those countries were subjects of the masters in Europe. At independence, these countries were given the same sovereignty as the big boys. So Togo has the same sovereignty as China. So Guinea has the same sovereignty as the United States. Malawi has the same sovereignty now with EU. So when you go to the world to trade, Togo is, you're supposed to be negotiating with China, and you all are equal. You have sovereign nations. There's no parity there. It was done by design. So African countries will be defeated at every turn. The unfair trade practices that are making it difficult for African countries to add value to our natural resources. It was all by design to make sure that we are forever defeated and dominated. To make matters worse, during the Berlin Conference, they implemented the rule of divide and conquer. And the way they did was to take tribes that were united and living together in harmony, broke them up into tiny little countries, and gave those countries to different countries that spoke different languages. Give it a couple of generations, people who were once one big family, they don't even realize they're family. I use an example of driving from Zambia. You're speaking English and you're going north. Pretty soon, you're in DRC. You're speaking French. You keep going a little to the east, you are now in Equatorial Guinea. You're speaking Spanish. Go a little bit north, you are in southern Cameroon. You are speaking English. Keep going, you are now in northern Cameroon. You're speaking French. Before you know it, you are in Nigeria, you're back to speaking English. It was all by design to cause maximum destruction. I'm talking about the building blocks for Africa's total destruction, which were created by the Berlin Conference that remain in place today. It is precisely why when you want to travel from one part of Africa to another, you gotta go to Europe first before you can come back down. Why? Because the airspaces were limited thanks to the Berlin Conference. It is precisely because of those boundaries that were created that fuel, oil from Mozambique has got to get out of Mozambique first. It has to get out of the continent first, only for Zimbabwe right next door to buy it back 30 times. You can stand with one leg in Zimbabwe and one leg in Mozambique, and yet Berlin Conference made it very difficult for us to trade. It's very difficult for a man in Malawi with his Malawi kwacha to buy a product in Nigeria, in Nigerian naira. It's easier to convert the kwacha to the US dollar, the kwacha to the euro or to the British pound, and the naira the same way. All these technicalities we take for granted, they ultimately impact trade. And when you impact trade, you destroy the nations. There is no development. It's easier for a product to go from Egypt, to go from the United States to Egypt, than for a product to go from South Sudan to Egypt. It was all by design. So when I talk about the fundamentals not being addressed, the fundamentals for Africa, they must be addressed through integration, economic integration, political integration, melting of the borders, and completely destroying, killing, and burying the Berlin Conference. The rule of divide and conquer that also made the Africans believe that everything African was bad and everything European was better and more desirable. They sent the Christians, the missionaries, to also teach us. We didn't know about the color black and white before the missionaries came to Africa, before the colonizers, the settlers came to Africa. But they told us about the color black and the color white. And they taught us about the white angels and the black devils. Who has seen the angels? Who has seen the devils? But then they turn around and say, the devil is black and you people are also black. And the angels are white and we are white. Jesus Christ is white, even though the Bible says his skin was crimson. We know it's because when Mary and Joseph were running from Herod, King Herod, they were told to go to Egypt, not to Europe. Because in Europe, they knew he would stand out like a sore tooth. In Egypt, Jesus Christ would blend with others who looked like him. Jesus Christ was a brown man. But they said, never mind that. And even though we white people don't look like a white piece of paper, don't worry, we're white. Now let's go to church. And you need to get on your knees. And you must worship a white Jesus. And you must worship the white angels. And of course, let's dog out the devil that looks like you, black people. It was all by design to criminalize blackness, to make us hate ourselves, and forever be looking to be something that we can never be, white. Have you ever stopped to think about that? Every day you go to church and you worship an image that does not look like you, an image that will never look like you. And you're dogging the image that looks like you. Complete, total destruction of an individual from a very deep subconscious level. So it is that us black people are forever trying to be something that we can never be. So how do we think we can be closer to being white? We think we're educated now. We have a job, we have a house, we have a nice car. We feel we're closer to white people. And now we want to run away from those who look like us because we've made it. All these unnecessary material things that make us believe we're getting closer to what we have been programmed to think is better. And we're busy running away from ourselves. Which brings me to the next pillar of Africa's issues. It is the mind. We have so much self-hate. We do not like each other as black people. We have been programmed to dislike anything that has anything to do with ourselves. So where do we begin? We call that the legacy of slavery and the legacy of colonization. No amount of education, no UCLA degree, no Harvard degree, no Oxford degree can decolonize you, can cleanse you of the legacy of slavery. It's through understanding our history, understanding that you're part of somebody else's agenda, that you're riding somebody else's train, and the train is meeting their agenda, meeting their needs, and none of those needs are part of what you need. It's through understanding our history that we can wake our people up, particularly black people, to say, listen, this is what is really going on. And until you understand that there are pathways that have been in place, there's an agenda that has been in place to see to it black people are forever defeated and dominated. How then do you get out of it? You don't go to the doctor unless you know you're sick. As Black people, we have been so brainwashed that we don't even realize what our normal is. We have been so beaten down. I talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. For us Black people, I call it CTSD, continuous traumatic stress disorder, because our stress continues. We may not be lynched as we know lynching to be, but the lynching continues in other forms. It doesn't matter where you meet Black people. South America, Australia, India, Europe, United States, even in Africa, we're the most disrespected race. Even those foreigners coming to Africa, they feel superior to the African, simply because of the color of our skin. Last time I checked, the ability to produce melanin was not a crime, but we seem to be fallen victim because we have the ability to produce melanin. So Africa 101 is about a recap of our history, our journey as Black people, as a race, where we have been, where we are, what has been done to us before colonization, after independence, what continues to, the games that continue to be played on us, the World Bank, IMF, and the predatory loans they give to the African nations, other private lenders and the games they play with the Africans, to where Africans will forever be paying loans. The average African country is spending over 30% of their GDP on loan repayment. It's unheard of. How does a country grow? There's so many games being played, so many policies, and they keep changing. If it looks like Africans are getting a leg up, the rules of engagements keep changing. To what end? The Black race, if you look through history, is the only race that has been loyal to the white man. Completely loyal. With all that, they raped us, they lynched us, they tortured us, they shot us. And still, we remained loyal. Here we are today, 2020, and the beat goes on. Africa 101, the wake-up call, was my effort to wake up the Black race as well as the white race, to make them realize that as Black people, we are simply asking that we be treated the same way they want to be treated. That what little boys and little girls in Europe want is what little boys and little girls in Africa also want. We are not asking anything more. We are asking the world to do what is right, what is just, and what is fair. Not only to Black people on the continent, but to Black people around the globe. Systemic racism, bigotry, and hate have no room on earth. And the perpetrators of those abuses, to them I say, you may think you're doing a disservice to the Black race, but guess what? You're also doing a serious disservice to your children, grandchildren, and generations to come. Our children, regardless of their skin color, they deserve to live on earth, free to live on this earth the way they wish, without boundaries, without restrictions, and just truly love each other and enjoy humanity, regardless of your race, ethnicity, social status, political affiliations, gender. It is a free world. That's what we want. So Africa 101 is waking up not only Black people, but also Black people, to say, this world is ours. Let's enjoy it together as equals, because we are created as equal under God. I thank you.
Wow. Easy. Let me invoke the prerogative of the director to ask a first question,
Good.
if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Okay. Your Excellency, or I don't know whether to address you as Your Excellency or as my sister. I feel like
I like my sister.
you're more radical than you look. I must say, behind your very nice elite demeanor, you're channeling Marcus Garvey, you're channeling Angela Davis, you're channeling Malcolm X, you're channeling Kwame Nkrumah. I like it very much, and thank you for sharing your insight as well as your passion. You're an inspiration, honestly, and I think you're an inspiration will lead us to an opportunity to organize a set of priorities to move forward, and not just to talk the talk, but also to walk the walk. And I know that that's partly what your African Diaspora Development Institute is all about, and your interest in returning to medicine and bringing medical resources and training back to the continent. I know about that. The question, I'm going to be shameless about this and ask you the first question, and then I want to be more democratic, and we'll address the very many interesting questions that have come in during your talk via the chat channel. A lot of what you're saying, particularly about the way in which the European powers, starting with the Berlin, actually starting before the Berlin Conference, but extending to the present, have really structured the terms of trade into an asymmetrical relationship whereby one party wins and the other tends to lose. And you mentioned the need for economic and political integration. And a lot of that kind of thinking was foreshadowed by the work of Kwame Nkrumah in his critique of neocolonialism, and also his fascination and commitment to Pan-Africanism, and his desire in some ways to not just ideologically, but also institutionally create a United States of Africa. Do you think there's any future or any value in resurrecting that project?
Absolutely. 1963, at the invitation of Emperor Haile Selassie, the Pan-African leaders, the African leaders met in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, precisely to try and undo the damage done by the Berlin Conference. Unfortunately, when they went to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, they were divided. We had the Casablanca group, who were Ghana, Guinea, Mali, Egypt, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and I believe Libya. They were the minority. The majority were the nationalists who were saying, let's go slow. Let's not jump into this Pan-African thing. So it is that when they went to vote, the Pan-African group, which were the Casablanca group, who were saying Africa for the Africans, African Union now, they lost. We often say Africa lost in 1963 when the Casablanca group lost. The nationalists won. Every year, twice a year, the heads of states would meet. They came up with a compromise agreement, which gave birth to the Organization of African Unity. Year in, year out, the issue of an Africa speaking with one voice was raised, and year in and year out, they failed to reach a consensus until 2018, April, when the heads of states finally agreed on a decision that was going to address continental integration economically. So they agreed on a decision they're calling the African Continental Free Trade Area. That decision is going to be implemented beginning next year, where Africa is going to enter the world market as one customs union. That is huge. Integrating an entity such as Africa is a monumental task. The African Union is trying to take a page out of the issues that the EU faced as they were integrating Europe. They were only integrating 27 countries. In our case, we're looking at 55 countries. When you look at common currency, which is a big one and is needed, European Union was integrating 27 currencies, we will be integrating 43 currencies. At every level, issue after issue, integrating the continent is going to be a monumental task. So the decision has been made to start with economic integration. And then from economic integration, once we get that sorted out, we introduce other integration, layers of integration. For example, from the finances, we need the African, a single African currency. We need African stock exchange. We need a single African monetary policy. We need an African central bank. All that is in the plan. It is all laid out in the book about what the African Union would like to see happen. But the reality is we're very divided as we are even now. So trying to thread this needle is not an easy task. So they're gingerly going through it, working through it, but also keeping the eye on the ball, knowing very well where we need to be and the challenges that are going to face us as we try to reach that goal. But yes, in due course, I don't think it's gonna be in my lifetime that we will see a United States of Africa. That is ultimately what is needed. Africa must be a continent that wants to grow up to be like the United States. When the United States realized that as Montana cannot survive, as Delaware cannot survive, even as Texas or California, the United States of America came together and created the United States of America, the powerhouse. That is what Africa needs, ultimately. Whether we can accomplish that in the near future, I doubt it. There's too much yet to be done. But everybody understands that for Africa to truly be liberated, for Africa to take her rightful place on the world stage, Africa, the powerhouse, must come together and speak with one voice. That is our hope.
Thank you very much. Erica, I wonder if you would like to consult some of the questions that have come in. Let's open up the dialogue now.
Absolutely. Thank you, first of all, Your Excellency, for your amazing presentation and for answering Andrew's question. We actually have quite a few questions, and we encourage you to continue submitting questions through the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And what I'll do at this point is try to actually combine some of the questions together because there are some repeating themes. So the first question actually comes from Kevin Njabu, Dr. Njabu, who is based at the UCLA Institute of Environment and Sustainability. And he also heads the Congo Basin Institute and Center for Tropical Research. So his question is actually going back to this concept that you mentioned at the very beginning of your presentation. A doctor in Nigeria earns about $560 monthly, necessitating movement to countries where they can be better paid for their services. What can we do to start addressing the issues and concerns of medical workers and especially doctors? And I guess that's kind of the gist of the main question.
So it goes again back to these smaller economies and the challenges each individual country is facing. If Africa was to open up, even just as the integration could start with ECOWAS, the West African community, you would find that while a young man may not have an opportunity in Nigeria, you'd be surprised that he'll have an opportunity in Togo or in Cote d'Ivoire, and vice versa. It's like in this country, someone may not have a job. I had a patient one time, was looking for a job for 5 years until we were talking, and I said, well, have you thought about getting out of state? It had never occurred to him that he should get out of Tennessee. And next time I saw him, he had gotten a job out of California, and the wife was having conniptions that the husband was going to California and not staying in Tennessee. But they did move to California, and that's where his opportunity was. So when we open the economies up, you'll find that we are now going to be able to develop our economies so we can begin to pay people higher wages. These restrictive boundaries are really limiting growth, and that also impacts the ability to pay fair wages. Now, one could always say, well, there's still corruption in there. I get that. That's an issue, but the fundamentals are, if we open the economies and we can open up ECOWAS and people are free to move freely, we can also increase productivity and hence the income to the governments, and hopefully that would also equate to increased wages. So again, the restrictive economies, small economies, continues to be a challenge in terms of economic growth.
Okay, thank you. And we have quite a few questions actually talking about China and China's involvement in Africa. So I'll try to kind of put some of them together. So Mara Resnick asks, can you comment on Chinese investment in the continent and whether you see it as a good thing or just another country taking advantage and reaping outsized benefits for themselves, essentially a neo-colonizing force?
I like the question on China. It always tickles me. I was talking to one ambassador, and he gave an analogy that I thought was quite interesting. He said, you see, growing up in our villages in Africa, we have animals that live around the village. A hyena is one of those common animals that lives around the village. The hyena would know to go into the field and he'll eat some crops and leave some because the hyena knows there are other people who need to eat too. So he equated the Chinese as a hyena living around the village. And then the Western world, particularly Europeans who've been in Africa forever, they are like the lion that bulldozes into the village. They eat what they can, destroy what they cannot carry, and they leave nothing behind. The Chinese will bring 50 billion and they'll take out 30 billion. But when it's all said and done, what platform are the Europeans standing on for them to point out to the Africans that they look at the Chinese and see what the Chinese are doing? You have been in Africa for centuries. What have you done? Except steal from Africa, except exploit Africa. So if I were to put it very crudely, we have two thieves in our village. We have an old thief who's been there for centuries and a new thief. Now the old thief is warning us about the new thief. Are you afraid of competition? Are you getting my point? Both thieves have got to go. The Africans must come together and make sure that as we negotiate these contracts, China realized that they were not participating in Africa to the extent that they would like to. They found a loophole. That loophole was the fact that African countries are being made to jump through hoops to get funding. So they decided they'll make it very easy for Africans to get money. We would joke about how the Chinese will come to the governments with a checkbook and say how much, ready to write the check. No hoops. So yes, granted, at the beginning when China was beginning to increase its involvement in Africa, poor contracts were badly negotiated. And Chinese did get away with a lot. They would come into a country, and again, these countries were operating in little silos. Take a country like Malawi, you come in and offering them 5 billion, that's more money than they've ever seen. They'll take it. But some of the contracts were not properly negotiated. And all that is changing. Chinese should have been better neighbors. They should not have been giving Africans those bad contracts. But I can tell you one thing. Since the FOCAC meeting that was held in September of 2018, FOCAC, F-O-C-A-C, Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, that was held in August of 2018 between the African heads of states and President Xi Jinping. A lot has changed. The heads of states did bring out all the things that China was doing on the continent, particularly bringing all the labor from China and not engaging in skills transfer, which was really not a good thing. And also some of the practices, poor workmanship, that has really improved significantly, and also not respecting the environment. That continues to be a challenge. They used to be even more abusive and disrespectful to Black people. That continues to be a challenge, even on the continent, but we're speaking to it. A lot of contracts that could be canceled have been canceled. Those that could not be canceled are being allowed to expire. And Africans are being a little bit smarter in how they engage in these contracts with the Chinese. The bottom line is, we did not do a good job at executing these contracts. The Chinese could also have been better neighbors. But at the end of the day, Africans are looking for foreign direct investment with partners who truly care about the people on the continent, partners who want to treat Africa fairly, partners who understand what their citizens wish to have, where they come from, is what the Africans wish to have on the continent. So we ask those who are coming to Africa that above all else, pack your suitcases chock full of humility, honor, and respect for the Africans, and we will roll out the red carpet for you. So yes, talk about China, but the reality is you must also ask the question, the Europeans, you have been in Africa for centuries. What have you done? Where is the development? Where are the infrastructure, the roads, the railways, the bridges, the ports? Where are they? What have you been doing in Africa besides extracting Africa's wealth? We must engage in that conversation as well.
Thank you. There are quite a few questions as well that I think will be maybe very relevant for the work that you're doing through your organization, the initiatives you have, but also towards the very last chapter of your new book. So Regina Thomas asked, very straightforward, what are your thoughts on Africa having a reparations movement similar to some of the conversations underway currently in the US?
Reparations are clearly owed. I have a chapter in the book that talks about the evils of colonization and atrocities committed by the colonizers. Horrendous, horrendous. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And then you look at what was done to the children of Africa as they were transported across the Atlantic as slaves. Reparations are definitely due. Reparations are owed. Even the Japanese who bombed Pearl Harbor, they got reparations. What's really sad, most people don't realize, when slavery ended, it was the slave owner who was paid, who was compensated, and not the slave. The same happened in the UK, even in Zimbabwe, and it's gonna happen in South Africa, where the land that was dispossessed, those who were dispossessed of the land, they're not owed anything. I use an example of, myself. I'm a third generation, my grandfather, whose land was dispossessed by the British. And I use an example of Oppenheimer because where his grandfather's farm was is the area where my parents' farm was. Oppenheimer is the grandson of one who dispossessed land from the Africans. So me and him, I'm a granddaughter who was dispossessed. I lived an impoverished life because of what was done to my father by someone similar to Oppenheimer's grandfather. Oppenheimer lived a privileged life out of stolen goods. Come time to fix this. Oppenheimer owned over 2 million acres of land in Zimbabwe. His land was larger than the country of Belgium. To get that land back, they had to be compensated. So the ones who were the perpetrators, they get compensated. The victims are not compensated. The Black people are the only ones who have not been compensated for the abuses that we have suffered for centuries. Reparations must be paid. There's no question about that. And this conversation will not end until this issue is addressed fairly.
Thank you. So we also have quite a few questions that's essentially asking how people can get involved across the diaspora, Black African Americans in the US, in Europe, and then of course Africans on the continent. You talk about decolonizing the mind, tearing down some of these ideas of self-hate, self-loathing, and judgment, but also of course the economic and political dimensions as well. So is there something that the diaspora, as well as allies, white, otherwise, can do to help really dismantle these repressive regimes?
Absolutely. So I would hope everybody will take the time to read the book in order to fully understand what is going on in Africa. And at the end of the book, I have a little paragraph that talks about Way Forward. Way Forward is the African Diaspora Development Institute. It might surprise you that all these years that we have been here as diaspora, there's never been a place, one place in the US, in Europe, in China, that you can go to to know everything about Africa, any question that you might have about Africa. So ADDI is where we are hoping can be the repository of all the information that you need about Africa. If you want to go to Africa, if you want to invest in Africa, if you want to visit in Africa, come to ADDI, will help you navigate the process. Where we are now, we are looking to have a directory of close to 1 million people as possible to accomplish 3 things. 1, with the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area, we are very clear about one thing. Africa, as it stands today, does not have the capacity to build the Africa we want. In order for Africa to be built, in order for the African Continental Free Trade Area implementation to succeed, we are going to have to look outside Africa. Currently, it'll be the Chinese or the Europeans or the Indians or the Russians or the Japanese. The Americans, they're really not catching on to the African Continental Free Trade Area. And that's something we're hoping that can change. But that's not right. You see, you got to understand that a Black man does not lead a Chinaman to China. A Black man does not lead a Mexican man to Mexico. A Black man does not lead an Indian man, a Russian man, a Japanese man, a European man to those countries. The only place a Black man could lead all others outside Africa to is Africa. So if a Black man cannot be on the driver's seat of Africa's continental development agenda, and keep in mind, the African Continental Free Trade Area is introducing to the continent something that has never happened to the continent before. That is a conversation about how do we develop the continent, not individual countries. How do we feed 1.27 billion people, not just Kenyans, not just Nigerians. We are talking a continental development agenda. It is an agenda that must be well mapped out, well executed. And that development agenda, in my view, and it is the right thing to do, must be driven by the Africans. And by Africans, I mean all people of African descent. That is the definition of African diaspora by the African Union. The continental development of Africa must be driven by the children of Africa. It is only fair. Because if we do not drive that agenda on the continent, where else can a Black man or Black woman be in charge? If we cannot be in charge in Africa, where else can we be in charge? It is the right thing to do. And for that reason, the African diaspora and Friends of Africa, we must join hands and go to Africa and fill that seat that has our name. Because if we do not fill that seat, the Chinese are going to fill it. They have a 100-year plan for how to develop Africa. The Europeans are going to fill that seat. They've been filling it for a while. They have a 100-year plan for what they want to do in Africa. That void belongs to the African diaspora and Friends of Africa. So with 1 million people, we hope to send a strong message to the African heads of states that the first right of refusal of all contracts coming out of Africa for the continental development must be given to the African diaspora first, because it is the right thing to do. It's happening everywhere else outside Africa. So why can't it be the same way on the continent of Africa? The second thing, the African diaspora are here to stay. The African Union, I believe 2012, they approved through the Executive Council, the 6th region, the African 6th region, which is all people of African descent living outside Africa. But that decision has not been approved by the African heads of states to where we can officially be the 6th region, to where we can have diaspora in Addis also joining the Permanent Representative Council, which is made up of 1 ambassador from each country. They live in Addis. We need to have diaspora ambassadors joining the PRC so they can be on the table advocating for the African diaspora and also participating in the decision-making process of what's going on in Africa. We must be accounted for. We must be on the table. So we hope with that many names, we need to have our issue tabled as an agenda item by the heads of states. If we don't make it for the February summit, we hope to make it at the latest July summit next year. When we can have the African diaspora completely integrated at the African Union level and participate in the decision-making process, now you're talking real change with sustainable changes that are needed. We're talking about the diaspora being the missing link that Africa needs to truly build the Africa that we want. Keep in mind, the colonizers have been building the Africa that they wanted for centuries. That has got to come to an end. And the only people who can put it to an end are the African diaspora. Just to be clear, as we speak today, there's not a single African country that has the capacity to build a railway line. There's not a single African country that has the capacity to build an airport. So I find it quite interesting, particularly when I'm talking to the diaspora, they get upset that, oh, this country, the Chinese are building this, and this country, the Chinese are building that. I remember one of my sisters, she called me very frantic because her country had just given out 600 megawatt contract to a Chinese company, 3 separate contracts of 200 megawatts each. She was very, very upset about it. My question to her was, my sister, if you can tell me that you know of a group of diaspora that have the expertise and the funding and the unity to go take one of those contracts, I'll call the president and ask him to give them that contract. She just busted out laughing. And she said, Ambassador, where am I gonna find them? You know the situation with the diaspora, we are not united. And I said, then my sister, forever keep your mouth shut. Until you have diaspora who are willing to come together and put their money where their mouth is, you need to stop complaining. Go tell the grandmother in that village who is 75 years old, has never had electricity, has never had running water, has never had a paved road, that she cannot have those necessities because you in the diaspora, 10,000 miles away, you don't want the Chinese to do it. It doesn't even make sense. That's how ridiculous it is. Until you are ready to say, I am going to do my part to address this issue, to just sit 10,000 miles away and complain about the Chinese, it doesn't make any sense. What are the heads of state supposed to do? They need development, and the expertise is not in the country. The finances are not in the country, but yet we want development somehow to just magically happen. Come on, guys, let's be realistic here. Let's not use the same colonial thinking. We want problems, we have problems, we put out projects, and then come implementation, we are waiting for the white men to take care of it, because that's what we are programmed to do. That's what we are programmed to think. No, we can do this. The third item that we're going to accomplish with 1 million names is to have as many people be part of the diaspora fund. The fund is in the process of being registered. We hope everybody, once it's registered, the finance people will begin series of conversations to educate people about it. And then we would hope every family, every diaspora family and Friends of Africa can commit to investing $1,000 a year to perpetuity. Your children will grow up knowing once a year I must put $1,000 into the fund. You are doing it for your race. That is how we get our respect. When we can be financially liberated, when we can have that financial independence. 1 million people with $1,000, that's $1 billion. There are 55 million Black people in this country. Let's take just 3 million. Let's also take 2 million from Europe. That's 5 million. That's 5 billion a year at $1,000 a year, $83 a month. Now let's do it year in, and year out to perpetuity. You can see how that fund can quickly raise billions of dollars, and we can fund the building of continental Africa very easily. But it takes people who say, I believe in my race, no more George Floyd's. I believe in what we can do when we are united, and that we should be the race. We should be the generation that's going to put an end to this curse. But it takes us waking up and understanding that we must do what other races have done. We live in this beautiful country of the United States. You ask for the voices of the Chinese diaspora, loud and clear. The Mexican diaspora, the Irish Americans, German Americans, Italian Americans, Jews, all very much loud and clear. They stick together like superglue when it comes to their countries of origin. But when you ask for the voices of the Black people, you might as well go to the graveyard. We're too busy running away from each other. We don't want anything to do with Africa because we're being told it's a disease and dying continent. Guess what? If you were to fly to Africa today, I can assure you over 75% of the flights, those people don't look Black. It's because they're going there because there's something amazing and wonderful going on. But you Black people are listening to the wrong voices, being told, do not go to Africa. Far from it. We must wake up, and that is why everybody must watch, or rather, get a copy from Amazon as an ebook, and hardcover is coming out soon, of Africa 101 and the Wake Up Call. So go to ouraddi.org or ouraddi.org and join, be part of the movement that's going to say, this world belongs to all of us, and that nobody is superior to anyone, that we're all created equal under God. And that's what the mission should be. Let's accomplish those three objectives by coming together and having a powerful force that's going to say, first right of refusal of all contracts out of Africa must be given to the children of Africa in the diaspora. Let's have the 6th region approved so we can have dual citizenship and representation at the African Union as African diaspora. And third, let's be prepared to start funding a very big African diaspora fund that will be the one to fund the projects, the continental development projects on the continent, in addition to other forms of fundraising.
Okay, so I'm looking at the time and I understand that we are coming close to when we have to part ways. I just wanted to address a lot of the questions I'm seeing in the Q&A. In addition to what Her Excellency just mentioned about where you can order the book, we will be emailing you with information about how to order the book, how to get in contact with her office, as well as the recording for this presentation. So that's Your Excellency, if you have time for 1 or 2 final questions.
Yes, I do. I just wanted to say the book, you go to africa101.org. You can order the hardcover, which will be signed, it'll be autographed, and it is numbered. I'm only going to sign 5,000 copies. It also is interactive. At the end of every chapter, there is a barcode. You scan the barcode, and you get to watch a video of me talking about that chapter and why I wrote that chapter and what I hope you can get out of that chapter. To join the movement, go to ouraddi.org, ouraddi.org, and join the movement. And while you're there, there are 4 ways to donate. You can donate to the Operations Fund of ADDI. You can donate to the Women's Empowerment Program, Youth Empowerment, Legacy Program, or the COVID. Do your part. Also, you can go to Amazon and Google Africa 101 on Amazon. You can get the ebook of Africa 101. On that note, I hope you all enjoy the journey of Africa through Africa 101, the Wake Up Call. And I do hope by the time you finish the book, you will be awoken. And don't keep the book to yourself. Share it. and engage in conversations. And I hope UCLA, you could also consider having that book as part of your required reading. And I'll be happy to come visit you when COVID allows us, so we can engage in more conversations about our world.
We would be very happy to have you again in a non-COVID world especially. So on that note, I suppose if we have time for one final question, we have a lot of educators in the audience, K-12 educators, educators based at UCLA and at other universities. And some of the common themes of some questions we've been posing is around this idea of decolonizing the university, decolonizing education, and teaching African Americans, as well as more specifically, to bridge that kind of gap between African Americans and Africans, as you yourself mentioned. So do you have any suggestions for all the educators in the audience as to what kinds of pedagogical reforms would help with the decolonization, with bridging that gap and making Africa the priority that it should have always been, whether it's in the term of courses that are taught, the need to be taught, the content in courses that are already taught? What would your advice be?
You have raised a very important question when it comes to the divide between the continental Africans and the African Americans. I think a lot of it is based on lack of understanding of our history. I've often had people come to me and say, but Ambassador, the Africans sold us into slavery, and some are quite bitter about that. Others would say we suffered more than the continental Africans. I did touch on that in the book, where I believe it's like page 41, where I intentionally put a photograph of Black people hanging on a tree outside Bulawayo in Zimbabwe. That was, believe it or not, Lord Baden-Powell, the founder of the Boy Scouts. That was his favorite photograph. He called it the Christmas tree. Black people hanging from the tree looked like ornaments on a Christmas tree. And right below it, I put in a photograph around the same time where Black people were hanging from a tree in Georgia. So for those who think the suffering of Black people in America, African Americans, was worse than what happened in Africa, I know for a fact, after you read the book, you're gonna think differently. When we begin to realize that as Black people, what joins us is our Blackness. That we must underscore. I've been on platforms where African Americans have said, but we are different. And my question would be, how are you different? If you were to walk down the street with my husband and you say, who did you see? They will say, oh, we saw two Black men. They don't say, I saw one Black man who was born in Africa and another one who was born in America. They see two Black men, plain and simple. If I were to take the same two men to the streets of Accra, which is where my husband is from, they're gonna see two Black men, two Africans. They're not going to see where you were born. What unites us is our Blackness. What unites us is our Africanness. Africa is home. We must be anchored. We must reconnect with the continent. If we do not reconnect with the continent, we're like a ship which is all sails but no anchor. The rest of the people living in this country, and that's why I keep repeating the United States, the melting pot, they are anchored in their countries of origin. With the exception of the American Indian, everybody else in this country is an immigrant, a descendant of an immigrant. So when we begin to understand Africa from that point of view, Black America, you must reconnect with the continent. Africa is home. Accept it, embrace it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Africa is going to be as good as we make it. But when you accept Africa as home, you'll find that the journey to true healing, the journey to unity, the unity that is needed among us as a race becomes less of a battle.
Thank you. So with that, I see that we have many more questions. I'll do my best, we'll do our best to connect you with Her Excellency's office so that hopefully the conversation can continue beyond this presentation. I know that we have some colleagues from the African Times who would like to ask a couple of questions. If you have a moment to stick around at the very end, we'll try our best to connect you. That said, sorry.
I said, Absolutely, I am available. If they want to email their questions, they want to call and schedule a call. Ola is on the line. She will be happy to schedule all of them. We can continue the conversation.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And that said, I know that Andrew, you invoked the director's right to ask the first question. Would you like to invoke the right to ask any final questions or offer any concluding comments?
Well, actually, I think the ambassador has worked very hard for us today. And at one point, her voice was even cracking.
Yes, I should have brought some water.
I think you've ended on a powerful note, and I'm going to second your suggestion, Erica, that those, including our colleagues at the African Times, I do apologize. We're doing the best we can to field questions from a variety of sources, but I think it's time to close this off now. But in Yoruba, we would thank our speaker by saying, "Eshe pupo orin pe ewire." Thank you very much. Your head is full. Your head is blessed. You spoke well. And when you say you spoke well, that's not just saying you spoke well. That means that you spoke with ashe. You spoke with the power of actually influencing the future, which is what the Allah Ashe has. So I'm very inspired. I'm very grateful. I don't know how you get into your discourse. If I could lecture half as well as you presented today, I would get outstanding teaching reviews. So I'm going to call you back. We are going to call you back. I look forward to working with you on many agendas through our African Studies Center, through the Diaspora Development Initiative, the African Diaspora Development Initiative, with my colleague Agrippa Izozo here at UCLA. I'm very grateful that he put us together, in fact, and I look forward to many more exchanges. So to all of you assembled here online, I still see we have 173 participants, down from about 191. Thank you very much. And
I have a favor to ask of you.
Okay.
Can you promise me that you will increase more African studies than you currently have? Reviewing your program, you tend to focus more on the Middle East. And if I may remind you that the Middle East is not Africa.
Well, I think you haven't really done your homework, Ambassador, if I can be so bold.
Okay.
You can look at our strategic vision report and the courses we teach, our programming. We do a lot. We're not actually a department. We are a research center. The African Center is what's at UCLA is called an organized research unit. So apart from organizing African language instruction, we really focus more on teacher training, student training, and cutting edge transformative research that is both policy oriented as well as academically and theoretically oriented. We hit that. So actually the resources at UCLA pertaining to African studies as well as the diaspora are pretty well known and pretty good. So, but yes, I will promise you, first of all, how can I deny you when you're asking me in this way? You know you've got me. You know you've got me. I do promise you that I make it my agenda, my mission to really, especially at this time when Black Lives Matter is remobilizing the consciousness that is so easy to fall into a dogmatic slumber in this country, to really address, as you pointed out, the structural framework of racism, and not just the case-by-case phenomenon, but the way it gets institutionalized within the fabric of our economy and our polity. This is our struggle right now, and I do think your message, which is that looking at African studies, African American studies, knowing one's history so that we don't keep repeating it, is really an essential part of the solution. So yes, and my answer is yes.
But another question, is there a need for African studies as well as African American studies? Could this be combined? Would that make sense to combine them so the story is complete?
Very much
Not
so.
in a disjointed way.
In fact, you put your finger on one of our current, it's in process right now, the African Studies MA program, it's called an interdepartmental degree program, is currently arranging and talking with the newly founded Department of African American Studies to merge with the department so that we can centralize and coordinate our resources and create an Africanist track within that department. And we've already housed 2 African languages, with a Swahili coming in soon, cross-listed with African American Studies. We're fortunate at UCLA that we have a bunch of, I think, we have good political relationships between both areas. As you know, probably, in many universities, there's a tension between the Africanists and the African Americanists, which is based on, it can be ideological predilections, it can be based on racial politics, it can be based on resource competition. We don't have those problems, at least now. We have a very good vibe going on at UCLA. So I think your recommendation is spot on.
Thank you very much.
This is the journey to One Africa.